Imagine this, a test, a really critical diagnostic test, maybe for something serious like hepatitis B or even a heart attack, starts giving results that are, well, misleading. Not just once, but kind of repeatedly. What happens then?
Right.
That's exactly what we're going to try and unravel today. We're doing a deep dive into a recent FDA warning letter. It was issued to Beckman Coulter Inc., a major name in medical devices.
A big player, yeah.
And this isn't just some dry regulatory paperwork. We think it's a really powerful case study, especially if you're working in quality, regulatory, or maybe risk management.
Absolutely. It really is.
So our mission for this deep dive, we want to unpack the core issues the FDA brought up, understand the direct lessons, actionable things for professionals like you listening, and maybe most importantly, explore that critical link, the one between these kinds of findings and actual patient safety. Because, at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right?
It is. And what's really quite illuminating about this particular letter is how it just peels back the layers on the fundamentals of a strong quality system.
Right.
And the impact, or sometimes the lack of impact it has on patient well-being. We're going to look at some very specific examples from the warning letter.
Okay.
Examples that really clearly show why these seemingly technical details are just so critical. And, how organizations can maybe move beyond just ticking boxes for compliance.
Or it's a real culture of quality.
Exactly. Genuinely embodying that proactive approach.
Okay, let's get into it then. Let's unpack this warning letter. One of the things that really jumped out, I think, was this recurring failure the FDA noted. It was about establishing and maintaining procedures for risk analysis, specifically how they classified severity levels. That sounds kind of technical, but it seems pretty fundamental.
Well, it's far from just technical paperwork.
Yeah.
It really raises that critical question.
Yeah.
Why does severity classification matter so much? Why is it so important?
Yeah.
The letter spells it out. Under classifying the severity, rating something as less serious than it is. Well, it doesn't just mess up your risk assessment on paper.
No.
No, it can directly lead to patient harm. It essentially creates a systemic blind spot.
Okay, how so? Can you give an example?
Sure. So take their immunoassay product safety release. This includes tests for hepatitis B markers, really crucial stuff.
Right.
The FDA found cases where issues like potentially false positive or high positive results, things that really should have been flagged as severe risk.
They just weren't.
They were downplayed.
They're inappropriately rated, yeah.
Right.
And look, that's not just a small admin error. It directly hides the true potential for serious patient impact.
Like what kind of impact?
Well, think about missed or delayed diagnoses. Or even the risk of disease transmission if you're talking about, say, a false negative in blood screening context, though here it seemed focused on the diagnostic side. The point is, the true risk wasn't visible.
Wow. And you mentioned this wasn't just a one-off? No, and that's what's really insightful or maybe concerning. The letter details very similar problems with another critical product, the Access Immunoassay I Plus 3.
Ah, troponin. Heart attacks.
Exactly. This measures cardiac troponin I. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, that's basically the gold standard biomarker for diagnosing a myocardial infarction, a heart attack.
So accuracy here is literally life or death.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And the FDA found that under classifying false low troponin results, well, it meant that a misdiagnosis of a heart attack could be categorized as less severe than it actually is.
Wait, so a missed heart attack diagnosis might not be flagged as severe?
That's the implication of underclassification, yes. Think about what that could mean. A patient potentially being discharged inappropriately because of a false low result.
That could be catastrophic.
It could have severe, potentially fatal consequences. Delayed treatment, wrong treatment.
Okay, I see the connection now.
And it connects to the bigger picture. For a test like this, designed specifically to help diagnose heart attacks quickly and accurately, a false low result has immediate, direct, and potentially severe consequences for patient care. It just starts a cascade.
A cascade of failures.
Right. Delayed treatment, incorrect treatment decisions, maybe leading to irreversible heart damage or worse.
And was that it? Or were there other examples?
The letter also pointed to issues with their Digoxin product safety release.
Digoxin, that's a heart medication, right? But it needs careful monitoring.
Very careful. Therapeutic drug monitoring, as they call it.
Yeah.
And here, false low results for Digoxin could lead to subtherapeutic dosing. Basically, the patient doesn't get enough of the drug.
Why is that so critical for Digoxin?
Because, as the general principles of therapeutic drug monitoring highlight, People metabolize drugs like digoxin very differently. Keeping the drug level in the right therapeutic range, not too high, not too low, is absolutely vital.
To avoid side effects and make sure it works.
Exactly. Minimize adverse effects, prevent toxicity, but also ensure the treatment is actually effective. So, underclassifying the severity of false low results here, it directly undermines patient safety again.
By hiding the real risk?
Precisely. Not just theoretical risk, but very real-world potential consequences for that patient's health outcome.
So these severity classification problems, they weren't just isolated slips. The FDA seemed to see them as symptoms.
Symptoms of a much broader, systemic breakdown.
Yeah.
That's what comes across the company's whole quality management system.
Right. And a big chunk of the warning letter then focuses on their corrective and preventive actions. CAPA, as we often say.
CAPA, yes. And the FDA noted multiple pretty significant failures within that CAPA system itself.
Like what was wrong with their CAPA?
Well, for starters, a lack of clear definitions for nonconformances.
Okay, what's a nonconformance, just quickly?
Basically, any deviation from what's supposed to happen. An unexpected test result, a process step missed, a product not meeting spec. If you don't clearly define what counts as a nonconformance.
You can't consistently catch them or deal with them?
Exactly. They also found escalation criteria were insufficient, meaning there wasn't a solid, standard way to make sure critical problems got raised quickly to the right people.
So big problems might get stuck at lower levels?
Potentially, yes.
Or
not treated with the urgency they deserved. And maybe the most critical finding here, inadequate procedures for determining severity levels within the CAPA system itself.
So the problem was even inside the system meant to fix problems.
Yes. It's like a broken feedback loop. If your CAPA system can't accurately assess the risk of the very problem it's supposed to be fixing,
then the fix won't be good enough.
Your corrective actions will almost inevitably be insufficient. The problem might come back, or you haven't really addressed the underlying risk to patients.
That's fascinating. So it wasn't just about having CAPA procedures on paper.
Not at all. It was about whether the system was actually effective. Was it properly designed? Was it implemented consistently? Was it maintained to truly get to the root cause and prevent issues from happening again? The FDA seemed to find gaps there.
So if the system for fixing problems is itself flawed, what does that mean for actually getting things right? The FDA's response to the company's actions was quite critical, wasn't it?
It was. They stated the company's responses were inadequate. Why? Because they failed to address the systematic nature of these violations.
So fixing this specific finding wasn't enough.
No. It's not just about patching the immediate hole the inspector found. It's about understanding why the hole appeared in the first place, rooting out those underlying systemic causes, and then making sure the fix is applied everywhere it needs to be, across all relevant products or processes.
And the FDA felt the company hadn't done that.
That's what the letter implies, yes, that the approach wasn't comprehensive enough to address the system-wide weaknesses.
And this connects to other parts of the quality system, too.
Absolutely. It points to weaknesses not just in CAPA, but in related areas. Things like design controls.
How things are designed and changed.
Exactly. And also non-conforming product procedures. How you handle products that don't meet the requirements.
Okay, what did they find there?
Well, the FDA noted instances where design changes affecting critical things like how image data was processed in their devices.
Very fundamental stuff.
Very fundamental. These changes weren't adequately controlled or verified. Think about that. If you change how a device analyzes data, but you don't rigorously test and control that change.
You're introducing unknown risks right into patient diagnostics.
Precisely. And furthermore, their procedures for controlling non-conforming products that failed specs, weren't robust enough.
Meaning, bad product could get out or issues weren't investigated properly.
Both are potential risks of weak non-conforming product controls. It really suggests a kind of disconnect. A failure to ensure that design changes are fully validated and that product problems are thoroughly investigated and fixed in a systematic way.
A way that actually stops future problems and protects patients.
That has to be the goal, yes. These weren't just, minor technical glitches. The pattern suggests more serious, pervasive issues within their whole manufacturing and quality management approach.
Okay. So for the quality regulatory risk professionals listening, people like you, this deep dive, it offers some really crucial lessons, doesn't it?
Immensely crucial.
It really highlights that these regulatory findings, they aren't just items on a checklist. They're direct indicators often quite stark indicators of areas that are impacting patient safety.
Sometimes in ways that aren't immediately obvious until you connect the dots.
Right.
And that really brings up a key question, I think. How can organizations make sure these kinds of systemic issues don't become, endemic,
Yeah.
baked into how they operate?
Because the consequences are so clear here.
Stark and undeniable.
Yeah.
This pattern of underclassification led directly, or had the high potential to lead directly, to patient harm, misdiagnosis, inappropriate treatment.
And the fact the FDA found it across multiple products.
Yes. Across the hepatitis B assays, the troponin assays, the digoxin assays, that consistency is telling. It strongly indicates this wasn't just one bad day or one problematic product line.
There was a systemic vulnerability.
A systemic vulnerability right in their core risk assessment framework.
Yeah.
And that demands a really comprehensive top-to-bottom fix. It shows how easily, if you're not vigilant, a seemingly minor procedural flaw can kind of metastasize.
It'll be a widespread threat to patient well-being.
Exactly.
So looking at these systemic failures, what can senior leadership do? They hold the ultimate responsibility, right? What can they do to not just react when the FDA shows up, but to proactively build and sustain a really robust culture of quality, one that stops these things taking root in the first place?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it genuinely has to start with a fundamental shift in mindset, moving away from just reacting to findings, which is often too little, too late.
Towards proactively building that culture.
Yes, building a truly robust quality culture. And senior leadership must ensure that risk management isn't just, another procedure, another box to tick on a compliance checklist.
It needs to be deeper.
It needs to be a deeply embedded principle that guides every single decision at every level.
How do you make that happen? Policy documents aren't enough.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It means serious investment in comprehensive training that goes beyond just reading the SOPs, hands-on, practical training.
Yep.
It means empowering your teams, from the people running the tests in the lab to the engineers designing the products, empowering them to critically assess risk, to correctly classify severity, and importantly, to raise concerns without fear of blame.
Creating that psychological safety.
Absolutely. And it also means providing the resources needed, whether that's enough qualified people, the right technology, or simply enough time to do things properly, especially for effective CAPA. Not just quick fixes, but real root cause analysis and verification.
So resources, empowerment, training.
It all feeds into fostering an environment where quality isn't just the quality department's job.
It's everyone's responsibility.
It has to be everyone's responsibility. An environment where the potential impact on patient safety is the ultimate driver. The non-negotiable bottom line for every single decision, every single action, no matter how technical it seems or how small it might look on the surface.
That makes sense. So today we've taken this comprehensive deep dive into one specific FDA warning letter, but we've seen how these seemingly technical details in quality systems, they connect directly, profoundly to patient safety. So for you listening, whether you're deep in quality assurance, navigating regulatory pathways, or managing risk, this isn't just another document to read about. It's a really potent, real-world case study.
It really is. And it's such a profound reminder, isn't it, that every classification you make, every procedure you follow or maybe don't follow, every detail that might get overlooked has potential real-world consequence.
Right.
What's truly fascinating and frankly quite sobering here is seeing that ripple effect. How one foundational breakdown in a quality system can just cascade across multiple products, multiple tests.
And ultimately land on patient outcomes.
Ultimately impacting actual patients. So maybe the final thought to leave with everyone is this. As you go about your work, how can you and how can your organization ensure that those potential consequences to patient safety aren't just, considered, but are always right there at the absolute forefront of every decision you make?
No matter how small or technical it seems.
Exactly. No matter how small or technical it seems, that's the challenge.